Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. I appreciate you being here today. Today's video is going to be about how to build your support champions. Now, I did a video about a week ago on how to build an arena nuker. If you haven't watched that, you may want to go watch that. But in comparison, building a support champion is a lot more complicated than building an arena nuker. And the reason is because an arena nuker is a specialist. It has one job. And there are so many different jobs that supports do in this game. So there are so many different kinds of supports that are going to need to do a lot of different jobs. And then you can also build the same support differently to emphasize different aspects of their kit, depending on which fights you're using them in. So it's going to be a little bit more of a broad topic today. I'm not going to dive super deep into any particular champion or any particular build, but I will walk you through how you can sort of assess your support champions so you know what builds might be most effective for them, and then give you some examples from my roster so that you can see how those actually work in action. So the first thing I want to talk about is the designation support. What Raid calls a support isn't always what we think of as a support. So as you can see here, I'm in the Orcs faction index, and you have a label for each and every champion. Attack, defense, support, HP. Okay, we're not talking about this label when we talk about supports. As you can see down here from Seer, Seer is labeled as a support. But if you know Seer at all, you know that she is one of the hardest hitting wave clearing champions in the game. She is a damage dealer. There's a reason why Raid calls her a support, but in the community, we don't think of her as a support. Likewise, other champions may be supports without the support designation. So for instance, over here we have Duke. Now, Duke is a great tank. He brings a provoke, he brings a drop defense and a decrease attack. He even brings a decrease accuracy. So he is a tank and a debuffer. So his defense label is more got to do with the fact that he does damage based on defense, or maybe that you want to build him with defense as a stat, but we really also think of him as a support. So whether it is a healer, a turn meter increaser, a debuffer, a buffer, a reviver, somebody who has great passive effects or instant effects, somebody who reduces cooldowns. These are all different types of supports who may not be labeled support in the game. So when I'm talking about support, when you're talking about support, when any content creator is talking about support, what they mean is all the champions other than the damage dealers. That's basically a support. The first type of support champion that I actually want to talk about is a turn meter booster or a speed booster. This is a role that you're going to need a few of on your roster. And the good news is we get one of these champions 30 days in as a login reward, and that is High Katoon here in the Barbarian faction. So most players will be familiar with High Katoon, and what her role is basically is to get your team going. This is what this kind of support does. She can do that through speed buffs, she can do that through turn meters, turn meter increases, and as you can see, her A2 does both. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%, and places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. She also has an aura which increases speed in all battles by 19%. So clearly her kit is built around speed, speeding herself up, speeding her teammates up, and increasing turn meter. So one of the things that we want to know about each support type that we're taking on or trying to build is what is their primary purpose. High Katoon's primary purpose is to be the engine that makes your team go. So speed is a priority here. Now I do want to look at the rest of her kit. Her A1 has a chance of landing a decreased speed on one enemy, and her A3 has a chance of decreasing the turn meter of all enemies by 15%. So these are also similar skills in that they are based around speed, right? So clearly her kit and her theme is speed. She can speed herself up, she can slow the enemy. She can increase your turn meter, she can decrease the enemy's turn. But there is something to know about the way these skills work. Any instant effects or buffs that affect your team do not require accuracy. Any debuffs or instant effects that affect the enemy team require accuracy. Okay, so High Katoon's A2 does not require accuracy, but her A1 and A3 would require accuracy if you want them to land their effects. To land damage, you don't need accuracy, so that's fine if you're just using these to land damage. But if you're trying to decrease the turn meter of the enemy, or if you're trying to place that decreased speed, you are going to need to build accuracy into High Katoon's kit. Now, this is a good moment to actually talk about accuracy. If you go down here to the stats panel and just click anywhere on that, you will get this pop-up. And what it tells you down here about accuracy is that accuracy influences the chance of successfully applying debuffs on enemy targets. Make sure your accuracy is much higher than your enemy's resistance to give yourself the best chance of landing debuffs. What this is telling us is that accuracy is required to overcome the resistance of our targets, and you probably need more accuracy than the enemy has resistance, maybe a lot. Basically, the way this works in game is that there is a 3% chance of the enemy resisting any effect cast on it. And that's true for your champions as well if the enemy is attacking you. Then in addition to that 3%, as you build up your resistance, you will be able to resist more and more depending on the comparison between your resistance and the accuracy of anybody attacking you, or vice versa. If you're trying to apply a debuff and the enemy has high resistance, your accuracy might not be enough. So the first thing we have to decide about building High Katoon is, what is her primary purpose? Are we using her as a speed booster, as a turn meter booster, or are we using her as a debuffer? And probably we're going to use her as a speed booster. Then we have to ask, is her secondary purpose of debuffing, is that valuable to us? And if it is, we have to consider trying to find a way to add accuracy to the kit as well as speed. So what I'm going to do is actually show you my High Katoon and how I've built her. So this is my High Katoon, and right away you can see I have 3 speed sets on her. Now, I haven't rebuilt her in a long time, so she is not as fast as I could make her. You'll notice I only have 1 piece of 6-star gear on her. All the rest are 5 stars. But she is still primarily built for speed. Now, I have squeezed a little bit of accuracy on her. You can see I actually have 211 accuracy on her. But the purpose is not to make her super accurate. The purpose is to get her going as fast as possible. And if I can get any value out of her secondary purpose of debuffing, I will. Now, the sets that you choose for any particular support are going to be based around this primary and secondary purpose, the designation or the determination that you've made about how you're going to use this champion. But you also want to think about stats. If it is important for High Katoon to be fast, but she is super squishy and she dies, she won't be able to continue to buff and increase the turn meter of her allies, but she'll be off the board. So for any buffer, or often for any debuffer, chances are you're also going to want to build them relatively tanky, even if their stats aren't great for tankiness. So you'll notice that on the chest piece, I have gone with an HP percentage chest piece, and that's just to give her a bit of extra survivability. Now on her gauntlet, what I would have preferred to have done is gotten defense-based gauntlets, defense percentage, or even HP percentage again, but I didn't have a gauntlet like that had this much speed. You can see this actually has a double roll into speed. I'm getting 18 speed out of this gauntlet. I don't need High Katoon to have crit rate. There's no reason for her to have crit rate. So if I could ever swap this out, if I were to ever rebuild her, I would probably go into the filter. And this is how I basically rebuild champions. I go into the filter, I pick the piece I want to replace, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my primary stat of HP percentage or defense percentage, right? And then remember, as a substat, I still want speed because she needs to go fast. And so now I see here in the speed set, I do have 2 options. So I could potentially put this gauntlet on her, or this one. I could roll this one up and see what happens. But as you can see right now, I would be losing on this gauntlet, even though it's all the way rolled up, I would be losing 13 speed on my High Katoon. On this one, we can go up, roll it up now. Let's see if we land 2 into speed. We did. So I could definitely replace her current gauntlet with this one. Now I'm losing 4 speed there, but I can get that back from a glyph. I could definitely get 4 more speed on a glyph for her, and then I wouldn't lose any speed. And as you can see, I would increase defense and lose quite a bit of crit rate. Now, obviously, I'm going to bring her this gauntlet all the way up to level 16 if I were to replace it. So I'd get a lot more defense, and I'd probably get some other stats as well. For boots, obviously, we're going with speed boots. I could squeeze more speed out of her with 6-star boots, get 5 more speed there. But like I said, I'm probably not going to rebuild her anytime soon. She's fast enough for what I use her for currently at 289. But again, I could potentially push her speed more. Now, there is another consideration. If I really wanted her debuffing abilities to land more often, I could increase her accuracy. And one set to do that with would be a perception set. So a perception set gives both accuracy and speed for every 2 pieces. So this would be a way for a champion like this to not trade off too much speed to get additional accuracy. For most turn meter fillers and speed boosters, you're probably going to be building them very much like this. Basically, pile on as much speed as you can, with the exception of when you're trying to make a clan boss speed tune, you're going to have to hit a particular speed. But so if you look at my Arbiter, who is another speed booster and turn meter filler, she's built almost exactly the same way as High Katoon. Again, 3 speed sets. You can see she's very fast. And another thing is on the banner, I've put accuracy with a speed roll here. That's also the same on High Katoon because that accuracy benefits this champion. However, if you didn't want accuracy on the champion, you could go with a defensive or HP based banner. That would be better because it would increase survivability. Now it's time to talk about healers and buffers. And healers and buffers are often very similar. You build them in a similar way, and they're not that dissimilar to the turn meter fillers and speed boosters that we were just talking about. Speed will be less of a priority, but you still want to build them in a very defensive way because as long as they are alive, they're going to be providing you with their benefits. And if they die too easily, then they lose their value. Okay, so here I have Pythion. He was a fusion champion several months ago, and I was able to complete that fusion. Don't focus so much on the set that I happen to be using on him, but rather focus on the way we distribute the stats to make him survivable and focus on what he does. Now, if you don't know Pythion, I'm going to show you his skills really quickly. So he has an A1 that can heal allies. He has an A2 that cleanses and heals allies. It can also place a block debuffs buff on allies for 2 turns. So this is a buff, right? So he is a buffer as well. And then he can also revive allies and put a strengthen. So none of this requires accuracy. And one of the things you'll notice is I built him with relatively low accuracy. I'm not trying to get any accuracy on his kit, but sometimes you just get accuracy from stat rolls. So that will happen. But I am primarily trying to build him as survivable as possible. So one of the things that I've done is I've gotten an HP-based chestplate. Great, survivability. Also HP-based gauntlets, extra survivability. Now, when you're trying to decide between HP percentage and defense percentage pieces on your chest piece, your gauntlet, maybe even your boots, you want to think about what the champion does and will they benefit more from having a higher HP pool or more from having high defense. So again, looking at the skills, you'll notice that the heals on the A1 come from 5% of this champion's max HP. So that means Pythion's max HP. So the larger his HP pool, the more he heals his allies. So he's going to benefit a little bit more from HP than defense. It doesn't mean you want to ignore defense, but it does mean you want to prioritize HP in his kit. You'll notice I have put speed boots on my Pythion, and I think in general, you're going to want speed boots on pretty much most of your champions, except for your arena nukers, where you typically put the percentage stat that is the primary damage stat. But this is pretty typical. And when you think about it, the faster that Pythion goes, the more often he heals, the more often he can cleanse, the more times he can revive your allies. So that is primarily what you want to think about, is getting some speed onto him. He doesn't have to be as fast as like a turn meter filler. You still want him to be relatively fast, and you definitely don't want him to be so slow that, you know, the champions that you're fighting or the bosses that you're fighting are getting more turns than he is. So, you know, if you can get up to 210, 220 speed, that's a good starting point for these kinds of support champions, healers, and revivers. Again, that's relative to the speed of your entire composition. So if you're still, like, your fastest champion is at 170, that's okay. That's fine. You'll get more speed as you gather more gear, get more glyphs to improve the speed stats, and get luckier with your substat rolls. So eventually your speed will increase. In terms of accessories for a support champion like this, You'll notice on the A1, I have a blood shield ring. This just gives me a little bit of a shield when I attack, and that is specifically useful against Scarab Boss, but it can also be useful in other places, to like in Hydra Clan Boss, when you want an extra buff to potentially become the Mischief target, or the target of the Head of Mischief. But there can be also just a little bit of extra survivability in getting a little shield. You could also certainly go with Revenge accessories on Pythion, because remember, his A1 heals. So if you are choosing your accessories, you want to think about what the A1 does and what you're going to get value from more. Are you going to get more value from Revenge accessories, Blood Shield accessories, or even, do you want a reaction ring that's going to help you in Arena? For the amulet, I'm just going with more HP, stacking more HP. Again, accuracy is not really relevant here, even though I'm getting some accuracy. Likewise, crit damage isn't particularly relevant, but resistance is. So if I can put defense, resistance, and HP on this champion, I will. And finally, the banner, you'll notice here, I'm getting a lot of extra HP out of here. I'm getting some extra defense and speed. The attack isn't a throwaway because he does damage on attack. You want to know what the attack stat of your support champions is, because that might help you determine, which particular artifact or accessory you're going to put on, if you're throwing away attack or not. Okay, so now let's move on from champions that only support through affecting allies through supports who actually affect enemies as well. And so here I have Deacon Armstrong. He's a very good debuffer, but he also does other things, and we're going to talk about why we've built him differently than High Katoon, Arbiter, and Pythion. So looking at his kit, first of all, as a debuffer, he's going to have at least one major debuff. That is on the A2, which is a 100% chance to decrease defense. This is very important. You need this debuff in a lot of places. He is an arena champion for me, but he also runs in wave content. So an AoE decreased defense is very valuable. He needs accuracy for that ability to land. Additionally, he can place a leech on his A1, and he can also fill the turn meter of allies, but also decrease the turn meters of all enemies on his A3. So while the turn meter fill doesn't require accuracy, the turn meter decrease of the enemies does require accuracy. He also has a speed aura in all battles, which is excellent. So he is usually my second fastest champion on my arena team, at least my go first arena team, with that turn meter fill, the turn meter decrease, and also the drop defense. So very good arena champion, but really good in all wave content, even really good against clan boss. Now, if we look at the build, you can notice right away that I've moved a little bit away from the speed gear. I still have one set of speed gear here, but I have two sets of perception, and that is because I want the extra accuracy. Regardless of whether I'm using a buffer or a debuffer, I always want to build my supports tanky as possible. So here on my gauntlets, I have defense-based gauntlets for Deacon Armstrong. You can see there's a speed roll there. That's obviously important. Accuracy roll is important. The HP makes him more survivable. So these are all good rolls for his kit. As far as the chest piece is concerned, I needed a perception chest plate, and the best one I had was flat defense. It does have a roll in accuracy and another roll in speed, so it's not bad. But this would be the piece I would look to replace first. Even if I had to go down to 5 stars, if I could find a 5-star chest plate that had either defense percentage or HP percentage with both speed and accuracy on it, I would probably go in that direction. I just haven't gotten one of those pieces in a long time. Again, we know that speed is important, so his boots are as fast as I can possibly get them. That is more important than the substats on the boots, but I did get some resist and defense here, which is nice, so that also makes him a little bit more survivable. As far as the substat rolls are concerned, you're always going to want speed. You're always going to want accuracy on your debuffers. How fast they need to go is up to you based on the team composition, but perception gear is going to be extremely powerful for you, and because you build so many supports, and so many of them need accuracy and speed, you are going to be forging more perception gear than probably any other kind of set in the game. And remember, you get the materials for the perception set from faction crypts. So get in there into the faction crypts and get farming, because you're going to need a ton of perception sets. As far as the accessories are concerned, again, defense here with HP and defense-based rolls, accuracy on the amulet, on the substats. You don't need crit damage here. It doesn't really matter what the main stat here is. If you can get defense or HP, that's better. But obviously accuracy is the key. And then as far as the banner is concerned, accuracy is so important. You go with an accuracy on the main stat and you try to get speed on the substat. Remember that banners are the only place where you can get speed as a substat out of the 3 accessories. So you can't get speed from a ring or an amulet. So you really need to get banners with speed substat rolls on them. Now, as we look at Deacon's total stats here, you can see the accuracy is right at 500, which is maybe a little bit high for PvE content, but for PvP content, I'm going to get every point I can, basically. And so this is a pretty good build for Deacon Armstrong. 283 speed, 500 accuracy, and everything else is just poured into defensive stats. Now we have another type of support champion, and that is the utility champion. Now, utility can come in a lot of ways, but here in Renegade, utility comes from her A3. This A3 decreases the cooldown of all ally skills by 2 turns. The rest of the skill doesn't matter so much for our purposes today, but basically she is a cooldown reducer for everybody else. So again, we want her to have that ability up as often as possible, so speed helps. And then we want her to stay alive for as long as possible, so defense helps, right? And HP helps. You don't need a lot of accuracy in her kit, although her A1 does have a chance of landing heal reduction, and her A2 does have a chance of landing decreased speed and decreased accuracy. So if you want to put accuracy on her kit, you can. You can see she actually has a fair degree of accuracy here. I wasn't intentionally trying to do that, although she can land some debuffs. Those debuffs aren't incredibly important where I use her, which is Clan Boss. She's part of an unkillable Clan Boss team for me. However, in other fights, she would be able to land those debuffs, and 316 accuracy is not bad. But I was trying to go for a specific speed because of the Clan Boss tune, and so while I didn't pile as much speed as possible, she's still pretty fast, and so I needed to use speed sets and perception sets to get that speed. But I really could have built her with almost any sets as long as I hit that particular speed, and she was survivable enough in the Clan Boss until the tune comes in, and then she doesn't have to worry about it because it's an unkillable Clan Boss team. So again, her accuracy, her resistance here, all of her crit rate, her crit damage, all of those are basically throwaways. The only thing I really care about is the speed tune. Now, on other teams outside of Clan Boss, you might not care about a particular speed. You may just want her to go as fast as possible, because the more she reduces the cooldowns of other champions, the more they get to use their big skills. However, often on a cooldown reduction champion, you need to speed tune them with the comp that you're using in the battle that you're using, whether it's in Iron Twins or one of the dungeons like Dragon Dungeon or something else. Because if she is reducing cooldowns when everybody's cooldowns are already reduced all the way, they have everything available, then she's wasting her skill. So it's not usually best to have your cooldown reducer go first, unless you mess with their AI in order to try to reprioritize their skills. Anyway, the point here being that getting this skill, you have to decide whether getting this skill up as often as possible is what you want, or if getting it up at the exact right moment is what you want, and then you have to build accordingly. Okay, so now I want to talk about some of the sets that you can consider putting on your support champions, depending what kind of support champion you're actually building out. As you can see, we've had a lot of speed sets, we've had a lot of perception sets for debuffers, and we've also had a lot of defensive-based sets, whether that's protection or defense, a life set, or maybe a regeneration set. Those sets are also good for support champions. So I'm going to just go through the list and kind of quickly review what ones you may want to be looking at. So the first thing to remember before you even dive into sets is that the stats really matter. So when I'm building a champion, often what I'll do is I'll go into the filter and I'll pick the piece that I want, say a chest piece, and I'll go down to the stats and I'll say I want a defensive based chest piece. And now I'm in the list, and these are all the sets that have a defensive percent chest piece. So I can say, okay, what are the best ones for specific supports? Well, regeneration heals that champion by 15% of their HP every turn. This is really good if you want to keep a champion alive through a long fight, and you may not have enough sources of healing in your team composition to keep them alive, or you want to make them super survivable. So a regeneration set can be good for a tank, or can be good for an HP-based champion, anybody with a high health pool, because the larger the health pool, the larger the heal. Immunity basically means you have perfect resistance for 2 turns. Now, you can mix this with a high resistance build, but that's sort of double dipping. Like you're trying to almost do too much there. What I would say is immunity for 2 turns is really good on a go second arena team. You basically don't have to worry about being debuffed for that first turn. And what that means is that you're going to be able to either, let's say, cleanse the rest of your team or speed boost the rest of your team or do whatever you need to do. So a support whose job is to cleanse or heal or revive might get some value out of an immunity set on a go second arena team. Another set that can be good for a support is a shield set. You can use this for anybody with a nice big HP pool. So this, like regeneration, works off of HP, but it gives a shield instead. So it makes everybody more survivable for at least the first 3 turns, whereas regeneration makes the wearer survivable for as long as the fight goes. So different ways to add survivability to your team, but both viable for champions with large HP pools. Another set to consider is a Relentless set. You can only get this as a reward from placing high in tournaments, so it's not a set you can farm easily. But if you get any good Relentless gear, you want to think about putting it on a champion where getting extra turns would be very valuable, as opposed to just speed being very valuable, right? Because you can increase the number of turns based by increasing speed. But for instance, if having back-to-back turns would be really powerful, or even, squeezing out 3 or 4 turns in a short period of time would be very valuable, you can certainly put this on a champion. I run my Seeker in Relentless gear. I at least run one of them in Relentless gear, and that is a very good way to increase the speed of my overall team, because Seeker, if you don't know, this is the Seeker in Relentless. He has this A2 where he already gets extra turns, and he fills a turn meter of all allies by 30%. So the more extra turns I get him, the more he fills my allies' turn meters, and so the whole team goes faster. So after Relentless, you also have Stun. Stun's an interesting support set. It may go on a support, it may go on a damage dealer, but it has a chance to place a stun of 18%. You generally want to do that as an AoE. So anybody with an AoE A1 could be in a stun set. Stalwart set reduces the damage taken from enemy AoE attacks. So if you need to keep somebody alive during like Clan Boss, where all of the damage is coming from AoE attacks, this is certainly a really good way to keep them alive. You can put this on your tanks. You can put this on your utility supports who are primarily in a Clan Boss killable team, or against another boss in another boss fight where AoE damage is the primary damage source. Reflex gives you a 40% chance to reduce a random skill cooldown. Generally, you want to put this on a champion who has one really important skill, and you turn off the other skills, so that skill is the only one ever on cooldown, and then you have a 40% chance to reduce that cooldown by 1 each turn. So you might put this on somebody like a Cold Heart who has the Heart Seeker, and you want them, the Cold Heart, to just use the Heart Seeker. You turn off her A2, and you run this. I know Cold Heart is not a support champion, or we generally don't think about her that way, but you could also put this on a support champion who has really one important skill that you want to have come out as often as possible. Immortal is good for tanks. It basically boosts HP and heals them by 3% of their max HP every turn. So for every 2 pieces, you get 3% heal. It's just another way to keep a tank alive. I'll mention the Resilience set here because it is 10% HP and 10% defense, and those are a mix of the 2 survivability stats that you generally want. Most people don't really like Resilience sets. I actually do. I think it's really good value. Again, you can get them from the Forge, so you're going to have tons of materials for Resilience sets anyway. So it's one of the sets where you can get some really good pieces, even if you're early game, because you're going to be able to roll into some 5-star pieces or even 6-star pieces, even if you can't farm dungeons at that level. Now, the other thing to consider is if you put 4 of these pieces on, you would be getting 20% HP and 20% defense. Whereas if you put a life set and a defense set, it would be 15 of each. So you get an extra 5% HP and an extra 5% defense when you put 4 pieces on. The protection set is the last set I'm actually going to mention today. There are other sets that you could definitely use, and you're going to want to research which sets will work with the champions that you have. But protection is an interesting set because this was just added to the game, by the way, not the set, but the bonus goes all the way up to 9 pieces. So we're going to have access to accessories that actually also act as parts of the protection set. So the first 6 are here. Those are the armor artifacts. And then the last 3 are going to be if you can get the accessories as well. And as you can see here, you have everything that you need for certain supports. Resistance, which is good to help keep them alive, HP, survivability, speed, which is always good on supports. And then we get a chance to place protected buffs. So if you're placing buffs, you have a chance for them to be protected, which means they can't be removed by the enemy. And then as you can see, more speed. If you get up to 7, 8, and 9 pieces, you can increase that resistance and speed and even increase the chance of a protected buff up to 75% chance. This is a really good set on somebody that you want to be survivable and you want to place protected buffs. You can also use this sort of to fill in sets. So for instance, let's say you have a regeneration set. You could also put 2 protection pieces on it and you're going to get 2 nice bonuses, resistance and HP. And that synergizes really well with a tanky champion that you might put resistance on or regeneration on or a shield set on. If you've been watching this video and looking at my gear and thinking, oh my God, look at your Seal of the Drakes. You've got 70,000 HP on, or you've got, over 4K defense. You've got all this speed and accuracy and resistance on it. Yes, that's true. I've been playing the game for over 2 years at this point. So if you are newer in the game, you may not have the gear that I have. But remember, I am a free-to-play player. I have gotten all of my gear from the same sources that you go out and get your gear from. It's just a matter of time and focus and understanding what gear actually works for you. As you level up your account, you will have more opportunity to get better gear, and therefore your champions will just get stronger. Remember that the philosophy of how you build that support champion doesn't change. So you may be eventually upgrading from 5-star gear to 6-star gear. You'll be going from a set that's a little bit weaker, like an immortal set, to a stronger set, like a regeneration set, or even a bolster set. So there are ways that you'll improve over time, but the philosophy behind how you build your champions does not change. So start out the right way and then just work on improvement incrementally as you progress your account. Okay, so that is it. I know that building a support champion is a more complicated endeavor than building a nuker or a regular damage dealer. So I do want you to go out there and research the particular supports that you are interested in building. Okay, you may want to look at the sets that you have and see which supports synergize best with the sets that you already have, or you may just want to build a champion that you think is going to be beneficial in the future and then grind out the gear that is best suited for that support. Either way, remember, consider speed. Decide whether you need accuracy or not. How many defenses do you need? Is it better to have defense or HP? Do you need resistance? Consider those things and you'll be able to build a support effectively. That is it for me today. Thank you so much for hanging out. I have been Colred. If you like this video, go ahead and drop a like or a subscribe to the channel. Our Discord community is still growing. It's growing faster and faster every day. So I would love to have you join us. The link to the Discord invite should be in the description of this video and also on the main YouTube page. Thank you again. I will see you in another video very soon.